In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Hello and welcome everybody to View the Wellness Podcast. Podcast is happening again.
Podcast Mondays.
Podcast Monday.
Yep, that's what's up.
Yep. Obviously you'll hear this on a Sunday. So don't
But
let
for
it
us,
fool
it's
you.
Monday.
We didn't record it tomorrow.
I know, it's confusing.
Magic.
No, we're back at it, and we've been, just kind of hit the ground running after Peru, and we've just been, back-to-back episodes, recording awesome episodes with cool guests, some repeats. Again, another repeat this week because, it's just time to bring back some of the greatest hits.
True that.
Right?
And Jill's amazing.
She's amazing.
She's amazing.
We love Jill.
Yeah.
We could go on and on about Jill.
Yeah. Well, and we will in the podcast.
We will, actually, yes. Before the podcast, during the podcast, and probably after the podcast.
It's possible.
But yeah, we just, Jill Miller of Yoga Tune-Up and the Role Model Method, all of these great programs and offerings that she's created, is really a body worker and yogi at heart, and has been a yoga facilitator and teacher and instructor for many, many moons. And, the thing about Jill is that she just has such a great way of looking at movement and the human body and just this, sort of well-rounded philosophy. And you can tell she's such a student of the body. She's really, a nerd at heart about this stuff. And as much as she loves the movement aspect of it, she's really interested in the importance of understanding the science and sort of the mechanics of what's happening in the body as well. And so I think in terms of being a yoga facilitator, she really brings a lot to the table. A facilitator in general, but especially in the yoga world, where I think a lot of times, a lot of stuff gets swept into asanas and breath work and, and sort of airy verbiage. She just brings like a really solid understanding of both sides of the coin for the human sort of
Animal.
Yeah, for the human animal, for the human condition too. Just what we as humans, where our hangups can be around movement, where we can get stuck energetically and emotionally, and how that can kind of feed over into our practices. So I just think that she's just a special lady, and we love talking to her, and we're always grateful when she takes some time for us.
Yeah, and she's super funny.
Yes, and she's funny. She's just the best. I don't know. It's like Adam and I have like total girl crush on her. Girl, guy crush, whatever human crush. We have human crush.
I think you just call it a crush.
We just have a crush, yeah. And we have since the day we met her. We just both left that first podcast with her. Like, she's just the best, and we just adored her right away.
Yep.
So anyway, we have gushed enough that it's time to remind you, if you haven't left us a 5-star review on iTunes, now is a good time.
Now is a great time.
Now's
because
a great time.
Once the podcast starts, you're going to be riveted. And you're not going to want to take the time to scroll down and do it. So while we're just airing about, carry on.
And if you need to, you could take a moment to ask yourself, what is it that's getting in the way of me in this 5-star review? Is it my thumbs?
It could be the thumb situation. Like
you can use your pointer finger.
Yeah. Yes.
So anyway, no, we are actually getting a lot more committed to asking you guys for the reviews, because it just does make such a big difference. So take a moment to leave that review and, help a brother and a sister out.
Yeah. We'll give you virtual high fives.
Yes. Virtual high fives.
And fist bump emojis.
Exactly. Awesome. So folks, we hope you guys enjoy this podcast. You obviously know how we feel about Jill at this point. So we are excited to have her back. And here we go.
Yeah.
Here's Jill Miller.
And just a prequel.
Yes.
Because we don't talk about it until the very end.
Yeah.
But she has a new baby mama program coming out. That's all about self-care for prenatal, natal, and postnatal mamas coming up. So we talk about it at the very end, but make sure you check that stuff out because it's super important.
Definitely. And I think the way she explains it, she says something about being a good host for your baby, which was like a really great way. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. You can actually like create a better environment to host this baby in.
Yeah, you can be a better dwelling.
You could be a better dwelling.
Yeah.
So
if you're going to be a dwelling, be a comfortable one.
Be the best dwelling you could be. I mean, come on.
Awesome.
All right, folks, enjoy the podcast.
And we're live. Welcome back to the podcast, Jill.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. We fondly refer back to your podcast that we recorded, I guess, a couple of years ago now, as still one of our favorite podcasts. And we still get, confirmation from folks out there that it's one of theirs as well, because I think that there's just such a lovely authenticity about you. And it's really obviously infectious in person, but it's infectious online too. So
I aim to be a human virus. Thank you.
Well, you are infectious. That's it. Yeah.
Or fungus. I mean, let's talk microbes. I do love them. That's my father's profession. He is an infectious disease doctor. And so I grew up obsessed with infection. So that you say that it's such a compliment to me. Although I know that some people might be like, I really don't want an STD. You're not going to get it talking to me. That's for sure.
We're talking a different kind of infection here.
Totally. Yeah. I get it.
So the first thing I want to ask you is I follow you on Instagram and keep up with you, I think, as most of us do with each other these days. That's kind of how we get our information from friends and family and colleagues and all that good stuff. And I was reading through this morning and I noticed the very first line on your Instagram, and it says, "My body thinks and feels." Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
So I have built my platform, the Tune-Up Fitness Company, and the two major programs that we've launched, Yoga Tune-Up and the Role Model. I've built my platform on proprioception and interoception. So body sense and then subtle sense. So body sense, meaning being able to find your way around your body in the dark, which your body is inside you in the dark, and knowing, knowing where your body parts. So your positional sense. That's really what we're talking about when we're talking about proprioception. And then interoception is your physiological listening ability. So it's your ability to sense the subtle subtle organ-like events that are happening within your tissues. It's also your sense of appetite, your sex drive, the movement of fluids throughout your vasculature, and the movement of air in and out of your body. So physiologic listening is the interoception part, and then proprioception would be more, gross sensing. Mm-hmm. So I've built, my work around helping people to get a better sense of themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I was teaching a shoulder workshop to yoga teachers at the Kripalu Center in Massachusetts. And this is a sort of legendary retreat center in the Berkshires. And, all the yoga and wellness and amazing things happen there in the wellness sphere. But they're really known for yoga. They had a guru for many, many years. And anyway, so I was invited to teach at their annual teachers conference, and I was invited to teach about the shoulders, and which, I'm not out there marketing myself as the shoulder expert, but this is, I teach on body parts. I teach about body parts, and I'm not as interested in body parts, I think, as I used to be. I love body parts, but it's like, do I really need, I'm interested in infection. Yeah. In different ways. But I was like, I'm happy to teach yoga teachers about the shoulder. And, don't yoga teachers know about the shoulder? Like, there was this weird, I had this sort of strange reaction in my head. Like, really? Are we still talking about the shoulder in 2018? Which, by the way, I'm sure going to come bite me in the tail in a few minutes when your next series of questions comes to me. Yeah. This is all about my body thinks and feels. So I want to explain this. So there's the background of the stories. I'm teaching at Kripalu. I traveled with my son 3,000 miles away, and I've got 50 yoga teachers, experienced yoga teachers in the room. And I'm trying to explain to them this concept of embodied anatomy, of, having the experience of speaking the language of your body out loud in order to help other people find their body story. And I've articulated this thousands and thousands of times, you guys. And I've written a book, and I've got 8 teacher training manuals I've written, and I've taught to hundreds of thousands of people, either in person or via media. And all of a sudden, I'm just getting more and more emphatic about trying to explain what it is to have your body talk to you. And I just said, my body thinks and feels.
Mm-hmm.
My body thinks and feels. Your body sense, your afferent information, the sensory information coming from your body to your brain, the nerves of sensing outweigh the motor nerves by 9-to-1 in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really wanted to enlarge this sense of their feeling body as this primary brain.
Mm-hmm.
So my body thinks and feels is what I was trying to convey to them. And, yoga people are super adept at sensing
Mm-hmm.
because we move in slow motion and we slow down our breathing and we slow down our observation and spend a lot of time moving in slow motion. And so this is just sort of distilling this concept of proprioception and interoception to boost this concept of that, the way your body feels is its way of thinking and expressing itself. And that we need to really value that
Mm-hmm.
more and more. And we don't have to make a story about it, and we don't have to overthink it because your body is expressing that. So my daughter, the other day, I was trying to share this concept with her in kind of a mom-daughter way. And so I said to her, you can feel your knee without moving it. You can move your mind into your knee and feel what it's feeling. And after I told her that, she said, pretend your brain is a finger. So I think I'm going to change the first line on my Instagram to pretend your brain is a finger instead of my body thinks and feels, because I just loved her rewording of it.
Right.
My 4-year-old.
Right. From the mouths of babes, right?
Right.
Got it. So what I think is interesting about that is she's so lucky that she has you speaking that language and helping her to learn that language at such an age. But what occurred to me as you were saying that is that I think people are so disconnected of what they feel. Like they don't know how to categorize what they feel. And I think a lot of that is because people have been, they don't have the language of deciphering feeling. What is that? So many people get an injury, they injure their knee and it seems completely out of the blue for them, but maybe they'd had, slight knee pain or, they'd had tight quads for years. Like there's all these things that kind of teed up to that injury, but people didn't have any categories to put these things in. So like, I think it's interesting to consider how we get people to understand what it is they're feeling.
I think we need to have a larger buffet of words and acceptability about those body-based feelings, period. And I think I know as a kid, feeling was kind of beaten out of me, and I was not beaten out of me. I was not physically abused, and I don't mean to make light of that at all. But, I was challenged cognitively. I was pressured to be the best in my class. I was pressured I got grounded if I got B's. Mm-hmm. So I was really rewarded for what my head brain was doing instead of my body brain. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that that all humans know that this is an equal opportunity, like body mind thing. Like it's all connected. So don't try to put one of them in a jar.
Right.
Don't put your hand in a jar. Don't put your brain in a jar. Like make your finger be a brain. How's that? Or let your brain be your finger.
Yeah, feel these things out. So it's interesting you say that, because I do think, the piece about being rewarded or at least encouraged to, to be a little bit more cerebral about things, right? Because it seems like the natural progression. If you're, actually we don't have kids, but it seems like it seems like it would go like this. So you have a kid, and you want it to be able to walk, and do things physically, and then once they have like the basics down, like they can walk and do this and jump and carry on. Now you really do focus, seemingly you would focus on the more cognitive aspects. You're like, okay, now I want to be able to reason with this monkey, and like carry on with my life. And so you could see where even if it wasn't, not on purpose, it's just kind of the natural progression as you move people through things, unless, of course, they like a big part of your relationship with your kid is getting them involved in some sort of sport where maybe, gymnastics or something like that, where it's like there is this challenge of the brain body connection, and hopefully whether it's being taught or just experienced, it's part of the deal. You're just continuing to kind of wire in that neural network of just like you said, the proprioception, knowing where you are in space and what your body's doing. And so I'm curious if what clearly you do a lot of teacher training for yogis specifically, and I know that you've worked with Kelly Starrett in kind of the more traditional strength and conditioning world a little bit, but I'm wondering if you see a shift anywhere in that the enteric brain, the body as a brain concept in the more, but I don't know if traditional is the right word, but like in the standard strength and conditioning world.
I couldn't rattle off a bunch of names for you in terms of other programs, but I have been outreached by many different formats or training programs that are really latching on to new neuroscience findings and some really intriguing movement modalities, some that are based on eye movements, others that are, what was the one that was another one that recently came in? Just a new view of posture science. And all of them are digging into, additional evidence-based research for their programming and output. And I think that, when you step out of your box and dive into any other training program, that in and of itself is going to increase your neuroplasticity, right? Because you're moving in a different way, period. So in this last, 5 months, I had a hip replacement 5 months ago, and I know we're going to be talking about that, but I feel like I'm just at summer camp every day now, because I've been entering into this right brain zone of movement both with my physical therapist and with my own exploration, and really trying to not overthink it. So that just tying all of this back together into, cerebral thinking and making story out of it, or trying to understand exactly what's going on. I'm really I love understanding exactly what's going on and the why. But one of the places where I have been negligent in my own, training in the last few years is I used to be a dancer. I'm still a dancer, but I would spend the majority of my days in this emotive space and in this, organic, almost animal-like place when I was training as a dancer. And once I moved into my ship in the yoga space, or this disruptive thing that I created, which is, essentially bringing functional movement into the yoga sphere, I spent a lot of time explaining things and spent a lot of time expressing biomechanic or kinesiological concepts, and just really dug into this left brain area, even while I was being super creative with it. So all this to say that I really do think that this is such an incredible time of walls being broken down from tribe to tribe. And I mean, just even this morning, I'm sure you guys are familiar with Mike Bledsoe and the Barbell Shrug podcast. Like Mike's picture today on Instagram he was standing on a yoga mat. And I wrote on his thing, I was like, I'll do your yoga for you. Come and do my weight training. Because it's so funny to see people being like, oh, wait a minute. I was trapped in a little cave. And that wasn't really helping me grow anymore. Or I learned everything I could from this system.
Yeah.
And now it's time to expand.
Yeah, I totally agree. You see that it used to be almost like everyone was in their camps and nobody visited each other. And it was sort of, was like this unspoken, I'm in this camp and you're in that camp, and we do our own thing. We have our own philosophies, our own modalities, and you do see a lot of cross contamination, if you will.
To take the infection metaphor further, yes, please.
Yeah, we're just gonna ride that one. But I think so I want to circle back to the hip replacement, because, and I have like a bunch of thoughts that are kind of pinging off in my brain. So I'm going to see if I can wrap this up in a clear question. But so we're talking about this sort of right brain versus left brain way of being in ourselves. And, one of the things in the yoga sphere is a lot of, letting go, really going inside, feeling things, letting go of resistance, there's a lot of speak about pushing through what's hard. And, there's all these terms that's like sort of really what, when you're in a class, means, you reach that point of like, I can't go any further, and you figure out how to go further. Right. Does that make sense? And so I'm wondering, with that being sort of the context for a lot of yoga practice, how did that influence your practice, and how did that lead and influence your hip injury? And what do you have to say about how people balance that within yoga specifically, but in general? How do you balance that sort of intuitive pushing the boundaries and finding the outer space of what's possible, but by still being safe and avoiding long-term, serious repercussions?
How long do you have for this answer?
As long as you want, babe.
I want to. It was good. All right. So November 1st, which was at this point 5 months and 2 weeks, because you count every week after you've had a joint replaced, I had my left hip completely replaced. I had the diagnosis in late August that I was bone on bone and had multiple bone spurs on my left femoral head. I had a slight cam, which is just a little bit of deformity in the femoral head. Maybe that was from birth, or maybe that was caused by some accident early in life that I'm not aware of. Who knows? I have no idea. But what I do know is that I was living with a diseased hip, but I didn't know it. And I had built my programming around sensing the body. I had built multiple programs around sensing the body. And yet here I was walking around in a body where I couldn't sense that I actually had a diseased hip, as this advanced stages of osteoarthritis and bone on bone. Probably I couldn't sense it because I was doing such a good job taking care of it, massaging it, moving healthfully, living a life that was, for the most part, not stress-free. That's for sure. I have 2 small children and did not sleep well through the pregnancy with my son or since he's been born. So, I'm not living in a, perfect example here of a stress-free life. But I do think that my movement practices preserved me in many ways and permitted me to move with, an insane amount of, good choices. My body was making good choices. It was also compensating heavily. And that I've been discovering now through physical therapy and all these, new modalities that I'm trying, is giving me insight into the last 20 something years, when I think I probably first got the first indications, but never thought that I was precipitating this injury. Right. So how did yoga contribute to this issue is what I think I'm hearing you say. How did the yoga contribute to advanced stages of osteoarthritis? Well, in a positive way, let me start with the positive. The positives was that yoga practices and meditation practices gave me the patience to slow down when I needed to, and to take an inner view. This goes back to what we were talking about at first. And so when you have the patience to, meditate or back off from, I guess, explosive or aggressive or sympathetic type of movements, then the you can update your nervous system into a very different zone. You can go and spend gobs of time in the parasympathetic modes of being. And so that was a real positive thing that yoga practices gave me. But the sneaky thing is that entering into a lot of deep parasympathetic ways of being can also numb you out to, while it can enhance feeling, it can also numb you out to what you're feeling. In the same way that, jumping, running can also numb you from sensing pain signals. So it's a very paradoxical thing. I wasn't like a runner and, getting hip cramps. I was moving through my body in ways that they felt safe because they weren't aggressive. But what was aggressive is holding poses. And let me tell you that this is the time between age 18 and age 30, not when I was developing Yoga Tune-Up. That was a whole other thing. But when I was really hardcore, I guess 18 to probably 32, 33, doing hours of practice every day and doing long held positions that you would breathe into, and you could roam your awareness to lots of different body parts. So you could actually take your awareness away from where you might be feeling nociceptive pain. Like you might be able to have such skill at sublimating your pain response that you were living in a delusional state. And I'm not saying that I was living in a delusional state, but I would say that a lot of the posing that I did back then was bananas. I mean, literally, I would look at a pose now, and I have tons of pictures to prove it, and say, well, that was stupid. That was a bad call.
Like what? What, like, specifically? Yeah.
Like doing the lateral splits. Like being able to put both legs behind my head and wrap my feet around my head and neck, and then wrap my arms around both of my legs and hold my hands behind my back. This is a pose called Kormasana. Nobody really needs to do that for their health.
Okay, this is great. I'm glad we're talking about this, because this is where we get into like show off yoga, right? Like it's like, look at these things I can do that maybe really aren't beneficial for health, but it's just something interesting I can do. And I'm not saying like that showing off means you're like a bad person or like egocentric about it, but it's like you're pushing the limit of what's possible in this thing for the sake of doing it, right? Like there's not necessarily this end point that's like, okay, once I get there, my cholesterol levels are going to drop, or
No, but there is the chemistry of pleasure,
right?
That comes out from your tissues from being manipulated in certain ways that are so unusual for your structure.
Got it.
And you get the experience of almost like releasing a pharmacy into your bloodstream. You get a high that I can't explain and that I won't be able to replicate just by walking.
Got it.
Or by doing some dumbbell presses. And so being able to enter into such a relaxed state of mind and manipulating joints and tissues in such a way that you get, a traction release of soft tissue, vasculature pressure, pressures on different parts of your body that are affecting, nerves from the skin all the way down to the bone that release freaking dope into your bloodstream. It's awesome.
Got it.
So I gotta say, I was hooked on it. Like I became a dope addict for these shapes because it was so marvelous until it wasn't. When you get up in the morning and you cannot walk to the bathroom with your knees without, my knees were locked in place. Like I would walk to the bathroom with my knees at a 75-degree angle. I couldn't extend them all the way because they were so tapped out from being overstretched the day before, and the years of that,
What I'm feeling here is this fine line of the point of yoga, which is like these spiritual corners of the mind and the body that people are looking for. I mean, the very first, the in India, when they created or they started practicing yoga, it was for in the spiritual context. It wasn't for exercise. So like this is kind of diving into that spirit quest of the practice. And, you can see lots of photos online of different yogi postures and, masters from India and whatnot moving into these shapes you're talking about. So there's this interesting paradigm here where you're like, okay, I can see where the spiritual practice and these openings of, really intense, amazing energy, which is what you're talking about, exists. But where that departure, where the departure of it being for spirit and for pleasure starts to create injury is probably a very fine line.
It's a very fine line. And, I was married to my practice, and I admit fully, and I've said it many times, I was very addicted to my practice. It's what regulated me. I didn't go down the path of alcohol or drugs. I went to my body for soothing. And I was an anorexic as a preteen, and I was bulimic in my late teens and early 20s. Is that right? Yeah. I gotta remember, when did I stop doing it's a blur right now, but my addictions all revolve around manipulating my body in different ways. And although when you're using alcohol, that's also manipulating your body and your physiology as well. But the form that my obsession and my addiction took is through different movement practices. And yoga just was the one that suited my structure the most because I was so mobile.
Right.
And I really needed to calm down. Like, it really helped me to find a place of peace, as did bodywork, massage as well. And I took the movement of the yoga type of movement to an extreme point. And I think that, potentially, had I been the same human and I hadn't gotten into yoga and I just sort of had a 9-to-5 job, maybe I wouldn't need a hip replacement until my mid-50s. Right. At some point, this body would have needed a hip replacement.
Right.
But I sure sped up the need for it by doing certain movements that took my femoral head well beyond ranges of motion that were okay. But what's interesting is my right hip's fine. So there was some small deformity in that left hip that, led the left hip to be the one that succumbed to the repetitive stress injuries. The right hip did not. And I remember hearing pops in my left hip when I would go into straddle splits every day. It was a predictable pop, didn't hurt. And that should have been the knock on the doctor's door at that time to say, hey, can you just check this out? I wasn't thinking that way when I was doing the straddle splits.
Well, as you wouldn't, because obviously you're young and you're, it's like you're just in that young mindset and that young mentality. And I think sometimes we think we are impenetrable when we're that age too. It's like, I'm healthy, I'm fit, I'm not the kind of person who gets an injury or has to worry about that. I'm the kind of person who can push these parameters of what's possible for myself. And so I think it's hard to, kind of impart that wisdom on a younger body. Or, if you were saying to someone right now that's in their yoga practice that is maybe that age that you were, it's hard to have people grasp that that's a potential for them. They feel so healthy and so capable that it's like, oh, maybe you're going to hurt yourself. And you're like, no, I feel so good though. I'm look at what I can do with myself.
Yeah, I can say so much now because I have all this perspective. But when I put myself into the mindset of where I was at the time, yoga was the panacea. And I was all in. I would go on retreat for a month at a time with my teacher, and we would practice 8 hours a day. And I would save up all my money every year to be able to go on retreat or, check out and spend 3 months, here or there, and then come back and work. And I was just completely into it. And and to refer back to what we're talking about in the beginning, I was in the cave. I was in the yoga cave, and I was working on mastery. And because I really bought into all the 8 limbs, and that it really was the way of life. And when a lot of the criticism that I've experienced online since I've been out about my hip and the extreme amount of yoga that I used to do, people are like, well, you weren't really doing yoga if you were doing, if you were hurting yourself. And it's like, well, look, you have a body and your body is vulnerable, and you can get a brain injury from knocking yourself with a kettlebell by mistake. Like, stuff happens. So, I was meditating just as much as I was doing asana. I was chanting. I was doing, japa, yantra, mantra, all the stuff that would keep boyfriends away from me. Do you know what I mean? I was all in. So I'm just saying, I wasn't in a cult, but I may as well have been a cult of one. And so I have learned from this experience. I came out of that mindset a long time ago when I started to bring functional movement into my practice, when I realized I'm a little too loose. This probably isn't healthy. And that's a whole other story, how that turnover started to happen for me. But when you're when you feel like you're going for the prize and you're living the prize, it's hard to stop.
Yeah, I could see that. So I'm listening here, and I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to tease out or sort of distill out something that the audience could take away from this story. If you're
Ooh,
okay,
I got it.
Me. Yeah.
Do lots of things. Don't get stuck into a cave.
Got it.
So the diversity. Yeah. So, and when you say that, you mean physically, mentally, the whole deal, right? So the idea being, if I can encapsulate this for my own brain, is that, throwing a little bit of strength training in, traditional strength training with, it's funny that I keep saying traditional, because I feel like yoga is so much older than kettlebells. It's like, which one's actually traditional?
Right.
I don't know. But what I mean is, the more common of these strength and conditioning modalities, right? So something that is just queuing up a different adaptation in your body, right? So we kind of want to be mixed modal,
100%,
so to speak.
Yeah, and I want to also demystify the yoga thing too. I'm sitting here looking at a book called Yoga Body by Mark Singleton. And it's called The Origins of Modern Posture Practice. I think it came out about 7 years ago or 8 years ago. And he details the origins of modern posture practice, which are the dozens and dozens of physical shapes that are all over Instagram every day, as really being a part of a movement of Indian nationalism, the YMCA, and European gymnastics, and Indian militia training happening in the early 1800s. So a lot of while some of the Patanjali and the ancient texts of yoga are very old, and they don't talk a lot about asana, the asanas that we know now are really only about 200 years old. And there's a lot of controversy around this, and his book was created an uproar in the yoga community. But it's interesting that really the movements were geared towards young males and militia training. So there was a warrior aspect to a lot of the positional work and the concentration work to sharpen the mindset of young males in training.
I've never heard that.
Combat.
That is,
yeah.
You're
welcome, audience.
That's a whole little nugget, because you kind of have this idea that these are ancient practices, and as far back as recorded time, people have been doing these asanas that does put a whole different sort of light onto some of the positions and what's actually happening there.
Well, and it's one of those things that I think it's yet another indication that people really need to sort out what's appropriate for them and to what degree they're going to go,
For
right?
them.
Because this is, just I mean, we could interject almost anything here. The paleo diet. It's great for you up until it's not, and then at which point maybe you should try something else. And mix this stuff in. And
Right.
I do think that there's a real tendency across all of these modalities and to get a little stuck in the ideology of the thing that you're doing. And when you do that, then the tendency when it stops working, or if you start to maybe not get the result that you're looking for, is to double down on the particular thing that you're doing. And it's, to kind of what you were indicating about some of the feedback that you got online is like, oh, well, you're just not yoga enough. It's not that yoga that
That's okay.
Like, you just need to go deeper. And it's
like, that's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting. But I think it's not unique to the yoga space. I mean, CrossFit's a perfect example too. Oh, no. You just, just knock 5 pounds off the bar, and then you just need to do it again tomorrow, and wait, you're eating way too many carbohydrates. That's the problem, and it's just this trippy infeeding of, what ultimately can end up being sort of bad ideas for folks, and so I guess, the point that I'm trying to make is that nobody knows what's best for you, besides yourself. And you really do, circling back to what you were saying in the beginning, probably the most beneficial thing that I could imagine that could come from any sort of practice, but specifically what you're talking about, is to be more in tune with that enteric brain and understand and trust it and say, no, I'm done today. Like, this is not for me, and that can be a tricky relationship for folks to develop, especially if they didn't grow up in a physical practice or just haven't had that experience. It's really easy to be persuaded by, trainers and folks who you're working with to just go beyond what, is probably smart for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's why like Yoga Tune-Up and the role model, so much of what I concentrate on helping our students to develop is a sense of themselves. And so if you're able to move well and understand your structure and the shades of gray within your own sensations, then you can take your body and yourself to any format and have a wonderful experience with it, rather than letting, having Pilates be torture or strength and conditioning be torture or yoga class be torture. It's like, oh, I have this experiential knowledge of my own embodiment, and I can try on these different outfits and reap really positive benefits, no matter what enterprise or what movement enterprise I submit myself to, because I have some self-knowledge, and then I can also have a query, right? I can have questions within myself or within the model. I think it's really good to learn a model. Like, I'm very grateful to, first of all, I'm very grateful to ballet, because it was a very rigid model of this art form. I'm very thankful for the multiple strands of yoga that I studied. All of them I consider art forms. It wasn't until I just tripled down on the science of movement that I was able to really appreciate that they were art forms. They were like different styles of dance, and that none of them were right. And none of them were wrong either. And so the more I studied the science, I could appreciate the art in all of these different modalities. And then I could also appreciate the experience of my body, sort of struggling with the movement patterns that these different fields of movement offered me. So I really want people to be able to make peace with that dialogue and let it be interesting. And then you'll also know, like, what doesn't work for you and what, or experience yourself going through different modes of adaptation and the crises of adaptation that happens when you enter into different movement modalities. I just find it really interesting. I love biology. I love infection. So it's just like, be the laboratory and be the lab rat at the same time. But I don't want to poo-poo yoga. that I just wouldn't do a lot of those things anymore. But I'm very grateful that I learned this model, this rigid model, and then I could compare it with other models. So I went very, very deep into, a certain model, and that allowed me to have insights of comparison. Whereas if you're just a dilettante and you're just going very shallow into so many models, you may not necessarily have the patience to develop the subtle sensing that you can get when you dig deep into a model, even if the model is wrong for you. Do you know what I mean? Like ballet was wrong for me, but you know what? Part of my healing with my hip now is freaking ballet. So that's what's crazy. My physical therapist she's a total diva. Like she was a ballerina. And she's like, let me see your turnout. No. And I was like, no, I don't want to. She's like, let me see your fifth position. I was like, ow, that hurts. And I was like, oh, bingo. No wonder I hated ballet. Anyway, but it's like, now I need to do it to heal.
This is cool. So I think that, for one, how cool is it to circle back around to something that you have the physical memory of being able to do at one point? Because this is something I think we see. So my dad actually had his hip replaced. Gosh, it's been a while now. It's probably been almost 8 or 9 years or something like that. But he had it done through the VA, and his physical therapy wasn't very solid afterwards, and he didn't have. He actually did have a physical practice. Like he was a Kung Fu, Kang Jo Fu, like Tai Chi guy back in the day. So he very well could have tapped back into that as like
amazing.
You should be able to do these things, but he didn't, and now he's suffering the consequences, and I'm like having to try to coach him through rehabbing this hip that's basically been, kind of ignored for a period of time. So great for you to not only have the experience of, knowing what it's like to move through these ranges of motion, but then also have a PT that's working with you on it. That's pretty awesome. So because we're talking about not delving so deeply into something that it's all that you do. And I want to, and I think what you said about metering that, because there's really some value in mastery, and finding something that you can really find the corners of, because at the exactly like you said, at the surface level, you're like, oh, okay, I've done that, moving on. And it's like, man, there's probably really something else there. And certainly from the physical mental connection piece is where mastery lies, right? Is you've got to get into that zone sometimes to really understand. Like with Olympic weightlifting, the snatch doesn't even get hard until it's over your body weight. And then it's an entirely different world. But the level of mastery required to get to that point is such that, if you gave up after, a month or so, then you would just never get there, So I think that finding that piece is super important. And then the other aspect of this is that folks have to find what's interesting to them. So if the options are a deep dive into yoga, or stand or sit at your desk all day long and not do anything, then by all means, it's like this deep dive or whatever it is. Running is, I think, another example that people can get pretty familiar with, because for like exactly like you were saying, that the drug hit that you get from advanced yoga and the drug hit that you get from advanced or at least prolonged running is a very, I think, similar thing, right? And so there's a tendency to get into that. And I'm certainly guilty of poo-pooing almost all distance sports, because we deal with so many recovering endurance athletes that we see the downside of it so often. But the reality, and I'm really glad that you brought this up, is that you're so much better off to be doing something than nothing. And we could really be focusing on just helping people find that edge, and that's all I have to say about that.
The end.
The end.
I think that we are very privileged to be able to even talk about the value of of boredom within the attempt to master something. I think that we are in a very privileged place that we can speak about that. And
that's all you have to say about that.
I just when I was like, when I just think about my lust, this passion I had for practice. And I did anything. I did work study. In order to be able to be in that classroom, because these things, running doesn't cost money. Your shoes cost money, but attending yoga classes or going on retreats, these are expensive things. But I would do things for my teacher or for the studio that I worked at, or the studio that I went to, in order to get reduced cost, or be able to kind of like keep my addiction up, so to speak, which is what a lot of an addict will find their way to get their drug. And I was very resourceful in doing so. But so I had this passion, even though there are these doldrums, like you said, in deep study, there is a profound boredom that can happen. And the amount of repetition that one must do is just so over the top, right? Daniel Coyle talks about that in the talent code, the amount of the 10,000 hours it takes to be able to master something. And that's definitely, I clocked way more than 10,000 hours, but I don't think all personalities have the drive necessarily to withstand that, to endure that level of boredom, or the chronicness of the repetition. And I know that the repetition, it made amazing lines in photography, and it dropped jaws of students or other people, and was able to give me this sort of notable physique, I suppose. But it was also that repetition of doing certain poses that disintegrated my hip labrum.
Right.
So there's so many catch-22 here.
This is great. So
anyway, moving on.
We are getting close to an hour, but before we do, I actually do want to talk about the role model method and sort of the method that you've developed, and then also your new project, the Role Model Mama. So maybe in our last few minutes here, you can just kind of give the listeners, and obviously we've introduced you and some of the method, but maybe you can just give them sort of the ethos and the overlying viewpoint of how your approach to movement goes.
Well, as I said in the beginning, I am very intrigued with helping people to get a sense of their bodies. And our tagline at Tune Up Fitness is live better in your body. The three programs now, I guess, are Yoga Tune Up, which is, I would say, brings functional movement and disassembles yoga poses, so that as a lens through which you can reassemble yourself into your human form instead of looking like a pose. So we do really fun, explorative things within a classroom that combines yoga, corrective exercise, self-massage using the role model balls, and meditation and breathing strategies to help you find your body's blind spots, which are the areas of your body that are overused, underused, misused, abused, or confused. And to that effect, the role model work is a series of 4 different therapy balls that we use both to map your body's tissues and to help you learn self-treatment strategies. We spend a lot of time talking about the health of fascial tissues and the range of fascial tissues within the body. I spend a lot of time reading books on fascia and attending lectures and conferences and in the fascia research world. And so that's all trickles down throughout our universe in classes and workshops and trainings worldwide. And then we have Role Model Mama, which is a prenatal, postnatal program that we're launching in just a few weeks. So the month of May is Mother's Day, and that's when it's going to hit the platform. And it is prenatal and postnatal self-massage, self-care for moms who move and moms who don't move. This is a way to help those who love you or the baby that's growing within to be hosted term. Well by you.
Hosted well. It's yeah, I mean, it's actually just incredibly accurate. You know, you're like, well, I'm just going to grow this thing while we're cruising around. That sounds fantastic. So we'll put links in everything to that to direct some folks in that direction, because I know it. I think what happens, and this is again coming from my air quotes traditional strength and conditioning background, is when you first get in and you start doing these things, there's the special populations category, right? And pregnant women fit into this special
Population.
There you go. What's the word I look for? The special population category. And that's what happens. You go, you start working as a trainer, you get your education, and they're like, whoop, special population. And then you don't get a heck of a lot of training or even like discussion around the specifics of dealing with pregnant women. And it's like, if I had a client that came to me and was like, hey, I want to do blah, blah, blah. And oh, by the way, I'm, 4 weeks pregnant. Like, I don't know. How pregnant is that? Not very, right? But I mean, but at what point do you, like, where does this start to get weird? So I guess my point is, like, at what point does it start to matter?
Where does it start
like,
to be pregnant? Come on.
What are we doing here? So I think that it's really great information. And from a professional's perspective, it's something that's really missing. What do I do with these folks, and where can I send them, to get really quality care? That's because I think it's got to be just ridiculously important. I mean, the fact that your body is going to go through this change of shape as dramatically as it does over the course of 9 months, and then even, obviously the subsequent months of sort of remodeling, it's huge. I'm like, why are people talking about this more? And maybe it's just, I don't know.
Not in your circles, maybe.
It's not in my circle, yeah.
I love your enthusiasm. I'm just like listening to Adam go on and on about it too. You're just giving Vanessa. I feel like he's going to be the first man to go through pregnancy just so that it's like, I feel like this is a little micro passion of yours, and you're just revealing. Yeah. So I get questions all the time about what's safe to do for self-massage during pregnancy. And so this is over 3 hours of content that covers from foot to face. And we talk about the face in terms of, developing the face of love and the amount of stress you're going to be in when when your bundle actually shows up. Your face is the primary relating and attunement instrument from your body to your child's. And, working on your facial musculature actually is profoundly downregulating. And because all the facial muscles are innervated, or many of the facial muscles that are all the ones that I chose in the video are innervated by something called the facial nerve that shares a source nuclei with the vagus nerve. And so when you massage these specific muscles, it helps you to really downregulate and relax. And that's very good for you as the mom, because you're going to spike into stress zones undeniably that you've never experienced before once that baby comes. So this is just there's just so many different practices. There's one for the pelvic floor, of course, and different ones for the abdomen and rib cage that can be done during different trimesters. And I have my colleague, Alyssa Strutton, demonstrating moves for earlier trimesters, and I do later trimesters. And we filmed this when I was 3 weeks away from having my son. And in fact, during post-production, we had some voiceover, some audio that we had to record. And it was during those voiceover recordings that my water broke. Like literally while I was finishing the last take of the last, clip, I felt this trickle down my leg, and I went to my doctor, and I got
that's
my
awesome.
baby came just a few hours later. It was amazing.
Obviously, you have tons of amazing offerings for folks from pregnancy to non-pregnancy. Right. But to wrap this up,
yes, yeah. to professional athletes and Olympians,
it's
and
very comprehensive, and your offerings are far and wide, and it's applicable to everyone. That's the thing about this stuff, is that whether you are a professional athlete or you're a stay-at-home mom or whatever, this stuff is for you. This is stuff that you can integrate into whatever you're doing, whether it's just living life more healthfully, or it's preparing yourself for the next game or the next competition or the next whatever.
Or a good night of sleep.
There you go. Which sometimes can be the next competition, right?
Exactly.
So before we wrap this up, though, I've got 2 words for you, and then I want you to tell us a story. And those 2 words are Katy Perry.
Oh my God. That's so crazy. I can't believe you're asking me about Katy Perry. So she's my best friend. Okay. You must have seen it on my Instagram feed that I'm standing next to Katy Perry, and she's holding a pair of my Yoga Tuna balls.
Yes.
Okay. So a few months ago, somebody reached out to me that said that they were Katy Perry's yoga teacher and that they've been doing the Yoga Tune-Up ball work with Katy Perry, and they had some questions for me about some things to do with Katy and with the therapy balls. And so I was like, excuse me, you've got my attention. And I had just had my hip replaced. So this was, I guess this was back in November. No, you know what? This goes back even further. This goes back maybe last summer. Somebody sent me a picture from Katie's Instagram story, and it was her doggy Nugget nuzzling a Yoga Tune-Up ball. And I'm like, what's Katy Perry doing with the Yoga Tune-Up ball? So anyway, her personal yoga teacher is a huge fan of my work. And so long story short, they invited me to come to the show wherever she was playing. And the closest one and the only one I could make was in Las Vegas. You're not going to find me going to Las Vegas frequently, folks. But, I think that was the first time I was in Las Vegas, probably in 14 years. And I dragged my friend, who's a great chef, Sherry Yard, with me to the show. And, we had the backstage thing and we got to meet Katy. And
so awesome.
When she saw me, and the yoga teacher was in the room, I don't want to out the yoga teacher because I don't know if she's cool with that. But she was in the backstage area and she happened to have a tote bag full of the balls because I brought her some extra ones for the rest of the crew. And Katy was like, let's take a picture with your balls. And I was like, thank God she has them. And we grabbed them and took a picture. So there it is.
That's awesome. And awesome. I don't know, is she really this tall? Because you look like so teensy tiny next to her.
Okay, so Katy is tall. She's like 5'10".
Oh, she is that tall. I didn't realize that.
And the first thing what she said when she met me, she walked up to me and she just pointed to her shoes and she started apologizing because she's wearing like spiky heels, which I find happens a lot. People start making excuses and asking for forgiveness when they, when they walk in front of me and really, in death shoes. But I'm really short.
Yeah.
You guys probably don't remember because we were sitting down, but I'm 5'2". I'm really small.
No, I remember you and I are similar. So, but I didn't realize Katy was that much taller. So I was like, okay, is she wearing huge shoes or what? So, okay. Well, that's super cool. I'm a big Katy Perry fan and I think that's just so fun.
So
it's so fun, right? And if ever you get invited back and you don't have a date, I will gladly accompany you. I'll be your ball carrier.
You'll be my chaperone.
Yes, exactly. So awesome. Well, thank you so much. As always, Jill, we love catching up with you and you're such a delight. And we just thank you for all your work and your spirit and just being who you are in the world.
Thank you guys. And I also really want to give a huge shout out to you for that scar video that we did on YouTube. Yes. So I don't know if the listeners are familiar, but a couple years ago when we did a little video together, you had asked me if I would show how to roll out a scar. And we did like a 12 or 13 minute video. And that YouTube video, I probably send more people to that YouTube video than any other video I've ever done on YouTube. So I appreciate that you asked me that question, that we captured that content.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad because again, I said this before the show. I was like, I felt like that day we came to your house, we like invaded your privacy, and then we're like, we did this huge long podcast, and I'm like, oh, by the way, want to film some extra stuff?
Right, shoot a quick demonstration video.
So I'm glad that there was some benefit to you in that half a day that you spent with us.
It's awesome. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jill. Well, where can folks find you?
They can find me at tuneupfitness.com. That's the mothership website. And then within that, you can go down the role model rabbit hole or the yoga tune-up rabbit hole. But if you want to find me, I'm mostly on Instagram at yoga tune-up and on Facebook, Tune-Up Fitness, Jill Miller, the usual places.
And then what about folks who want to look for classes where there are certified instructors teaching this method?
So we have about 500 teachers worldwide, from Croatia to Japan, all over Canada, Mexico, you name it. We've got people almost everywhere. They can go to the website and enter the country or zip code and find a local yoga tune-up teacher.
Yes.
And they can do trainings and courses, workshops, classes all over the world. I'm heading to Toronto this weekend and then Sydney, Australia the weekend after. But we have courses happening in Netherlands, like I said, in Japan, England, just hit us up.
Awesome. Yeah. And I know one of our bees got certified, and she's up in Michigan, Rebecca Tam.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah. So she loves your work, and I know she's fighting the good fight, representing the role model method and doing all the stuff up in the Great Lakes area. So is it Great Lakes, right? Michigan, Great Lakes. I
mean,
just
there are
like threw
lakes
that
up there.
out. I'm like, I don't know if that's even how you refer to that area.
That's
The
funny.
Midwest. I believe we call it the Midwest.
Yeah, there you go.
It's the Upper East Side.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, thanks, Jill. We'll talk to you soon.
All right,
Ciao.
Bye. Well, we hope that you guys enjoyed that podcast. And if you did, you might consider joining our Unveil Your Wellness program, which kicks off tomorrow.
It does.
Yes.
And what is our Unveil Your Wellness program?
Unveil Your Wellness program is like the most badass program ever.
It's our holistic
Wellness program.
It is our holistic wellness program, which means that you get daily strength and conditioning with demonstration videos and all your programming and all that stuff 7 days a week with everything you could kind of want on there, with ways of scaling it from beginner all the way up to pretty advanced.
Yes.
And nutrition strategies and food quality, food quantity, lifestyle stuff
coaching.
Like sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Super awesome community to interact with, mindfulness practices. I mean, it's kind of the whole Marianne in an app.
It really is. And honestly, it's delivered in these bite-sized chunks of information. So even though we just rattled off a whole host of things that the program includes, it's delivered in a way that you can take action. And there are these small action items, these small steps that are easily digestible. And, you know, even if you don't do every single one of them every day, if you do this program even like 50%, you're crushing.
Yeah, it's true. And you have basically Vanessa and I and our 3 amazing mentors in your pocket.
Yes.
So you pull the thing up, you whip open the feed, you're like, man, I'm wondering about this. You know, tag Vanessa, hey, how do I get spinach out of a can on the moon? And she's like, ooh, I know exactly how to do that. Blah,
can
blah, blah.
opener.
It turns out it's the same in space.
So weird.
Yeah. So even though the answer might be obvious, Vanessa still has it.
I will still give it to you because I'm queen of obvious. And even better news, if you sign up for B-Fest, you get an entire year of Unveil Your Wellness for
gratis.
Yeah, included in your fees. Yeah, included, as well as the meditation challenge. So again, we are all about creating holistic wellness solutions for you and giving you awesome events and opportunities to take that health and wellness out into the world, play, have fun, join with the community, celebrate, as I say on Facebook, celebrate our lives and celebrate our vibes.
Yes. And our next challenge, our next month of coaching kicks off tomorrow.
Yes.
Tomorrow, Monday, yes.
So if you haven't joined the challenge, you can hop on over to our website, bethewellness.com.
Yep.
Follow Unveil Your Wellness. Or if you sign up for B-Fest, you will get an automatic link generated to you that gives you your Unveil Your Wellness link to sign on. So lots of ways to get in there and get cooking and get cracking on the community. Yep.
And you can scroll down into the show notes from this very podcast and click the link that says Personal Paleo Lifestyle Coaching, and it'll take you exactly where you go.
Bam. We make it so easy.
Make it so easy.
It's like
and while
the
you're
can
down there,
opener on the
leave
moon.
a 5-star review.
Remove?
Remove.
Remove.
It's a remove.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.